Welcome to Western Wisconsin Journal. I'm Bobbi Pominville. I'm your reporter on arts, music, and today, even quilting. I tend to like to do more than art and music, and a lot of times it's things I really like. So today, I have asked my friend here to talk quilting. I know she's an expert and I'm not, so I want to welcome Nancy Gavin to the show.
Hi.
It's nice to see you again because
I know.
We did teach together for many, many years.
Oh yeah, a while ago.
And boy, that was good times at EP Rock.
It was good times at EP Rock, yes.
So today we're talking about the art of quilting. Would you first tell the audience what inspired you to start quilting?
Well, first of all, I learned to sew when I was in 4-H, probably 10, 12 years old. And my sewing teacher was Irene Kimball, who was a high school home ec teacher. Expected seems to be straight and perfect, and so that really is helpful with quilting. But I made a few quilts over the years, but when my daughter, when we had the empty nest and my daughter went to college, I was invited to go to the Hudson Heritage Quilt Show and joined the group, and it's been like gangbusters ever since. I've been quilting like crazy. So I just love it. You take fabric and you cut it up and you put it back together in a way that is different. And hopefully the way you put it together differently is better than what it was to start with.
Right, and we've got some really good visuals here, Nancy. And I know I want to talk about those. Before we get to that, would you tell us a little bit about the process and when you think quilting began, because I know I'm going to be shocked at this.
Well, quilting, the term quilting is from French, Italian, Latin, and it basically means layering. And so the layering of fabrics began during about 3,500 BCE. So the days of Moses, a long time ago. But we think of quilts as garments also, but then it was just garments. It was just garments to keep people warm. Now, of course, we use garments for quilting, but we basically make wall hangings and bedding from our quilts. So the very oldest bedding type quilt was made in Sicily, and it was made around the year 1100. It's in pieces, so part of it is in Barcelona and part of it is in London at this point in time. We believe that the art of quilting came to Europe across the Silk Road with the Crusades. So silk and wool and cotton were used for those. But yeah, I mean, it's very old. And of course, at that time, everyone had to spin the yarns and then weave the fabric. And so when you look at a house that was built in 1800, you notice it only has a few pegs, no closet. If you had to weave all that fabric, you wouldn't make many articles of clothing, nor would you make many quilts. So quilting evolved. Some of it was done only by aristocrats, women who had lots of time on their hands. While the common woman was weaving things for her family. But quilting really came to the United States in the mid to late 1600s and was utilitarian for the most part, used again for garments, but also for bedding. At that time, we didn't piece things. We had whole cloth quilts. So a piece of fabric that was woven with some batting or padding in the middle, and then another piece of woven fabric, but not pieced, not blocks like we have today. And, obviously it was for warmth. And it wasn't until the 1800s, like 1840 or so, when women started to, especially wealthy women, had the ability to sit down and actually cut fabric apart and embellish it with embroidery or embellish with beads and that kind of thing. But by the Civil War, quilts were a big deal. And quilts were a big deal in, probably 15, 20 years before the Civil War started, because the abolitionist movement had started, and women who were wealthy were making quilts and selling them to support the war effort.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yes, and they were using that money to help further the Underground Railroad as well. And then by the time the war started, both women in the North and the South made quilts for the soldiers. And old quilts could be cut in half because they slept on cots. And the difficulty there was that all the cotton was raised in the South. All the textile mills were in the North. And so the women of the South were definitely hampered by that process, especially when blockades were started and the trade couldn't continue between the North and the South. Women in the North could continue to make new uniforms, new quilts, whatever, and new tents and whatever their soldiers needed, while the women in the South didn't have access to that.
That is so interesting.
I mean, it's just, yeah. But, toward the middle of the 1800s, Singer invented the sewing machine. And once the sewing machine was invented, then it was available to middle-class women for sure, and upper-class women definitely. And that's when we really start cutting up the fabric and sewing it back together, And of course, then follows the westward movement, and women could take their sewing machine on the wagon train, but it had to be a hand-cranked sewing machine because they wouldn't have room for the base that was the treadle. So at that point in time, the quilts had a little bit of a shift, and you see women sitting around a quilt loom making friendship quilts. And so they would each woman would make a block, they would sew them together, they would embroider their name in the block and send it with their best friend west as a piece to remind them of their previous home. So, I mean, in a nutshell, that's a bit of quilt history. There's, you could delve into Black American quilts, you could delve into Hawaiian quilts or Native American quilts, or, I mean, the list goes on and on. There are medallion quilts and applique quilts and, just lots and lots of things.
Well, you really made sense there because I'm a History Channel nut, and I watched some Civil War things, and I think I even heard them say something about the soldiers needed coverings.
Yes.
So they were using that. But then I was thinking about George Washington and Abraham Lincoln, and I think they even showed their beds with quilts.
Yes.
So that's very interesting. Then both my grandmas had those sewing machines.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
And a special area in their houses. But then it stopped. My mother didn't take it to our house, and so there was nothing going on until, guess what, like you said, when your kids left. Well, when we left for college, my mother went to the church.
Yes.
And they had a quilting group.
Yes.
Now, you're into that, aren't you?
Right, and I think church quilting groups have really enjoyed a resurgence. I think that, part of what happened after World War II is clothing and blankets and all other things were manufactured. Yeah. Once the war was done, those factories turned into domestic things, and our mothers didn't have a need to quilt like our grandmothers had.
Yeah.
And so there's a period of 40 to 50 years when quilting almost disappeared and then became more of an art form or a craft or a hobby for people,
Right.
And but it's really enjoying a resurgence now. And churches are have quilting groups for a variety of reasons. Some send quilts to third world nations. Some make quilts that are local for charities. Some do raffles for cancer or a variety of ailments,
Right.
Alzheimer's, and we have a list of groups that can use cash. So, a lot of raffle quilts are done.
I'm
to
aware
raise
of that.
money.
Everybody's bidding on those, because
yeah.
they really are delighted to get one.
Right, yeah.
Yeah. And then I know my church gives the quilts to, I think it's Lutheran World Relief.
Yes, uh-huh.
And November is one of my favorite times to go to church because all the quilts are on the pews.
Yes.
And
yes.
you can walk around and see the different designs.
Yes.
Now, that's the next thing well, wait a minute. We got getting ahead of myself.
Okay.
I wanted to talk to you about the process, and that's
Yes.
kind of related to the designs.
Yes, it is. So
we'll talk about that a little bit, okay?
I brought a couple of tools. So
Oh, wow.
this is a cutting mat, and the one I use at home is, of course, 2 foot by 3 foot or something like that.
Oh, yeah.
Huge. But a cutting mat, of course, is marked so that cutting can be accurate. And this is a small ruler. They come in a variety of sizes, 16 inches by 16 inches, 6 by 24, and everything in between, triangles, hexagons, you name it. There are cutting tools and rulers of all sizes. And this is the coolest thing of all. This is called a rotary cutter, and they were invented in the late 70s, and it's really a razor blade that is a circle. And so fabric is laid on here, the ruler is laid there, and then you put the blade out and you cut a straight line using these rulers. And then you close it, or else you will cut yourself for sure. But
So that's really sharp to get through that fabric.
it's very sharp. It is literally a razor blade, yeah.
Okay.
Yes, one of my knuckles remembers that. So, yeah, you don't do it after 11 is what I learned. 11 at night,
Yeah.
when you're teaching the next morning.
I
So
hear you.
these are basic tools. And then, of course, you have your fabric and batting. And this is just a little sample that's not yet finished. And so here we have what will be a table topper or a wall hanging. And you can see I have my orange little goldfish here.
Right.
And the goldfish is constructed by using a square and several triangles. And once it's finished, it will have the quilt pieced top,
Right.
the batting that's inside.
Right.
And batting can be made either of cotton or wool or polyester, depending on preference or the purpose. So if you really want a warm quilt, you'd probably use wool. And the wool now doesn't shrink when it goes in the wash. It's already had that happen.
Really?
Yeah, pretty awesome.
I was wondering about that.
Yeah, yeah.
But in the old days, they didn't have that.
No, in the old days, when you had a quilt with the wool batting,
Yeah.
when spring came, you unsewed all of your hand stitching
Oh, wow.
and you sent the wool batting to a carder. And we had a carder in Chippewa Falls until probably 15 years ago. And they would send the quilt bat through the carder, which is 2 drums with little tiny teeth on it. And it would fluff them up and take out any of the, people's hair or whatever wasn't supposed to be in there.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and then of course before winter you'd have to put the top and the back together with your newly carded wool inside and stitch it back together for another winter.
Wow.
Kind of labor intensive.
It is.
But
It really is.
so that's a simple explanation of what we do. But,
Well, that's a wonderful explanation. I've learned a lot from you.
so it is fun. It is fun.
Yeah.
And
I know once you do it, you're addicted, right? That's
Pretty much,
That's
yes.
the way it goes.
Yeah, and so the wonderful thing is you look at these, and my husband and brother-in-law made cutting boards together, and they would cut wood like this, But if they made a slight error in their cutting, well then, you know, it was kind of too bad, so sad, doesn't work. But with fabric, you know, it's fabric, so you don't cry over it if you make a mistake. You know?
So is this your design that you made up, or had you seen it somewhere?
Oh, well, to be quite honest,
Yeah.
it was a mistake. So I had started out thinking I was making the bear paw
Oh, yeah.
block, but I turned the triangles the wrong way.
Oh,
And I didn't notice it until it was almost done, and then I decided that they'd be goldfish instead.
gotta keep doing it. Yeah. Oh, at first I didn't see what you meant, but now I definitely see
because these were supposed to be turned this way.
I think that's
so that
kind
it
of
would-
fun. I think a kid would like that.
Oh yeah, but I mean So we mess up.
Well, very good. Excellent.
So
And it must take, well, this is kind of crazy, but I know it's not hard and fast, but how long would it take you to make a big quilt for a bed?
40 to 60 hours at least. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. So for our graduation quilts that we make at Trinity, I think we
Right.
average about 60 hours a quilt. No, about 45 hours a quilt. Yeah.
Yeah, so when you go to that group now, are you helping other people with their quilts? Are you working on yours?
So,
kind of like,
Well, a little of each. As you well know, the quilting groups at churches
yeah.
always have a purpose, but
that's
it's
true.
a very social setting as well.
Yes.
And so it's a great time to talk about what's going on at church, how well our families are doing, what colors we like, what patterns we've tried, where we had to rip it out because we did it wrong, you know, I mean, all that kind of thing.
Well, you know, my mother now, after her 2 daughters left, can you imagine how she enjoyed that, talking
Yes.
to the ladies in the town and finding out what's going on? And
Yeah, it's important.
I think it's a wonderful
Yeah.
thing to be doing.
It is.
I actually do.
Yeah, it is wonderful. It's fun too.
Well, now, should we talk a little about the different kinds of designs?
Sure.
Because I've never seen that one you showed me now. It's so cool.
Okay, so
Okay, we're looking back here now.
this is a Dresden plate.
Oh,
And the Dresden plate is a very old
I've
pattern,
seen that.
obviously.
I know I've
And,
seen it.
This one is appliqued on a whole piece of fabric. So
Ooh.
even though the pieces are quilted here,
Yeah.
they stitch them on top
Oh, I could see
instead
that.
instead of creating a block where they'd have to do all of these inside angles.
What a lot of work.
Yeah, I rescued it from some thrift shop.
I love it.
Yeah.
Very attractive.
Yes. So, and then, let's see, this is Grandmother's Garden. And Grandmother's Garden is made all of little tiny hexagons.
Oh, okay.
And these are all hand sewn together. There are new techniques that you can actually use with your sewing machine, thank goodness. But this one was made by my husband's grandmother.
Oh,
Yeah.
nice.
And I'm not quite sure why it ended up at our house because she only gave her quilts to granddaughters, and my husband only has brothers. But
I know they have their rules.
yes.
And, you know, in families, I know sometimes I hear people say, oh, I wish I could have that one. But it's up to Grandma.
Yeah. So, yeah, hexagon. And so this is
Beautiful.
Grandmother's Garden, and each of these is to represent a flower, and the green is to represent the leaves and the rest of the garden, obviously. And
That's neat.
to make this, obviously, she creates each of these flowers, and it doesn't take lots and lots of fabric for each flower. So it's a great way for her to use whatever was left from making dresses for her daughters or pajamas for her sons and that kind of thing, and even shirting. So this is, this is probably men's shirting here,
Oh, yeah.
as is this little piece. That's probably men's shirting. And this is probably fabric from the this is probably 40s fabric right here.
Oh, wow.
But,
yeah, you can tell by the design.
Yeah, those funky colors. That,
Yeah, that's a different color.
And so it was a very way to be thrifty, but also a way to have handwork to do in the evening while you listen to the radio.
True.
And I do think that women have difficulty just sitting without something, reading or handwork or
I
something.
have that problem.
Yes. And I think that it was even more true during the years before television.
Yes.
And so, they crocheted or they knit or they hand quilted while they listened to the radio, probably listening to, Roosevelt or somebody.
That's a really good
Yeah.
thing to point out because we're back in those days.
Well, and the quilts were valued. I mean, Dan's grandmother made quilts for all of her granddaughters' weddings, but she only gave them the quilt tops. It was their responsibility to finish the quilt.
Oh my.
Yeah, I know. I think that's why it's with me.
That would get a lot of them quilting, right?
Well, or it would stay in this closet forever
And
and
then-
end up
yeah.
being in my house. So,
And then you'll have sons that go in there and say, what is this for?
I have quilts for my grandchildren already marked for them.
Oh my goodness.
The ones that they haven't already received.
And I know
of
you
course.
have at least 2 daughters.
I have 2 granddaughters and 1 grandson and 1 great-granddaughter.
Oh my goodness, how special.
Yeah, so they've all gotten quilts. But
And now then can we bring up the graduation quilt thing?
Sure.
Because I think that is really cool. I've never heard of that before. I went on your Facebook today.
Oh, so at Trinity Lutheran, we 20 years ago, Lori Pepper, who was our music director at that time,
Yeah, I know her.
suggested that we start making quilts for our graduates. And her oldest child was going to graduate.
Yeah.
And so at that time, we simply made a quilt for each kid. We didn't ask them what they wanted. We just made a quilt.
Okay.
And after 4 or 5 years, we realized, or maybe only 3 years, we realized that wasn't so cool. So now we mail a letter to them.
Ooh.
We ask them their favorite colors and what interest they would like displayed on their quilt. So one of them this year said, Manchester United, he loves that soccer team in the UK.
Oh, I've heard of that, yes.
Yes. So I ordered a Manchester United flag
Oh,
and used that as a medallion in the center of his quilt,
wonderful.
even though it's nylon, whatever. Another kiddo is a gal who plays softball. She's on several musical groups, and she's a karate instructor. So those 3 things were shown in her quilt.
And it's not this one.
No.
That's a different one.
That was this particular young man plays tennis and golf and football, but he aspires to be a veterinarian.
Wow, you had to get that all in there.
So there are chickens and kitties and dogs
I
and
see the
tennis
dogs.
rackets and all kinds of things on his quilt.
That's
Dobermans
so
and
cool.
Dalmatians.
Yeah, right
and-
down
yeah.
here.
So, but so
So
this.
that's so cool because it's just for the person.
Oh yeah, they're
What the person likes.
each one is unique. They're wonderful, and
Very nice.
we quilt with about 15 gals at church that do graduation quilts, and a few, come and go. If they have someone that they know, they'll join us that year, but not necessarily every year. And so it's great fun.
So they're giving of their time.
Oh, for sure.
And that is one of the big thing about quilters.
Yeah.
I have to say I admire a lot of those people.
Well, the other thing is we're always learning.
Yeah.
So
That's
we
true.
try a new pattern or we experiment with different colors. And so it is a way to stay current. The color choices change and the
Right.
fabrics change, and there are new patterns all the time. So
Well, as long as we're back here, could we go to your newest?
this is my newest quilt that's not yet finished. I bought the fabric because it reminds me of Willow River State Park.
Yes.
And I love walking to the falls.
Oh.
And so it's a quilt made of hexagons, and the hexagons are all made of 6 equilateral triangles, and they all have a repeat of the design. So you can see there's this little bit of blue here,
Yes.
and then each of these pieces is exactly the same.
Oh, I didn't notice.
And you put that together.
Yeah.
Each of these are exactly the same. And so you
Wonderful.
have to play with the movement of the color.
I can't. I have to ask you, how did you get the water to look like the falls like that?
Well, the center is a panel. So the center was printed this way, and I purchased this right here. It is it's like a photograph. It's like a painting of the falls.
Oh, I get it.
And then the
It
process.
is very, very
Oh, it's wonderful.
easy to, even I looked at it and I went, she's got the falls.
Yeah. It is.
And I thought, how did you get that? Well, that seems like it would be really difficult.
Well,
Okay, we got,
there.
oh, we're good. We got the mic back.
Yeah.
And the greenery and the rocks.
Yes.
It's very well done, Nancy.
Well, it's been fun to do. A
I
little
have to
tricky.
say.
A little tricky.
Now, what is your goal for that particular quilt?
Well, that quilt will be in the show in November, so I have to get it done.
Oh, yeah.
And so it needs its borders done yet, and it needs to be quilted, obviously. But
It'll be a popular one.
it's got some,
People will really like that.
it'll be fun.
Are you going to sell it?
No, it has an owner that's a secret. And
Oh.
I'm giving it to
All right.
someone special. So
We're not going to
No.
press you on that one. Now, let's say you're going to sell or whatever, a full-size quilt for a, I don't know, full-size bed. How much do you think that would be?
Oh, it gets to be very expensive.
That's what I thought.
Fabric is often $14 a yard now.
Oh,
So if you were looking at a full-size quilt, you're looking at probably 16 yards of fabric, and the time and the batting and the thread and all that sort of thing. So a full-size quilt easily can be $400 to $500. Yeah.
but like, what price would you set?
So
I can't quite add that all up in my
okay,
mind.
so what happens to those of us who quilt and sell our quilts on occasion,
Yeah.
we use a formula.
Oh.
So, some quilts are really difficult to put together. Some quilts go together rather quickly.
Yeah.
And so typically we use a price per square inch.
Oh.
And so, you do your math, the length and the width, and you figure out how many square inches that is, and then you multiply that times your price per
So
square
I
inch.
still don't have the price from you.
Okay, so if I were...
Give me an idea.
Okay, so for a full-size quilt, the quilting of it by a professional quilter would probably be $130.
Oh, I think that's reasonable.
But that doesn't include the top and the bottom, the top and the back.
Oh, you're talking about the quilt itself.
Just the part where you take it to the quilter and the quilter puts it on the rails and does that sewing.
So now let's add that part on.
So then you're talking $400 to $500.
Oh my. But if you find the one you want,
Oh, yes.
and you really need or want a quilt for someone,
Yes.
I'm sure people will pay
Yeah.
that.
Oh, yes.
I just know they will.
Yeah. Many of us make our quilts as gifts, and
Well, we have time to talk about one more.
Okay.
Let's pull out this one. You said it was quite a bit older.
this. Oh, yeah. This
I'll
is
grab this. Try to help
this
you.
is a quilt that someone would have probably bought at their local 5 and dime.
Oh, yeah.
And it's a baby quilt, obviously.
Oh, which way does it
And-
go? Here.
Well, it goes the other way.
Oh,
And
I'll get it.
it would have been already quilted. You can see the machine quilting is on here. And it would have been printed with that blue washable ink that we remember when you were a kid and you learned how to embroider. And you got this little piece of fabric that had that little blue design on it, and then you used your colored embroidery floss.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's how this would have come to someone probably with the embroidery floss, and it would have been printed with that washable blue ink. And
Oh,
the
yeah.
person would have
Okay.
done all of these little stitches,
Yeah.
and then when it was put through the wash, it would have lost the blue. And I think this is Old King Cole. With, Old King Cole was Merry Old Soul, Merry Old Soul was he. Called for his fife, and he called for his fiddler, and he called for his drummers 3.
I didn't get that
Yeah,
before you said it.
yeah,
Old King Cole?
yeah.
Oh, fun.
So,
And how come it looks like cross stitch here?
well, because that's how the blue was transferred on here. And the
Okay.
person did her embroidery cross stitches and did some feather stitches here, and
Oh, yes. So now, how old do you think this one is?
Oh, this is probably from the 40s, I would think.
Okay.
And it's been well loved. You can see that
And it's a children's
yes.
bed.
It's
I
about
would
the
say.
size of a crib.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah.
Very nice.
It's yeah. I mean
it doesn't have any stuffing, does it?
it does, but it's so old.
Oh,
it's so
it's worn
old.
out.
Yeah. And cotton does deteriorate. It's a natural fiber, so
Yeah.
yeah. So this one
Well, I just had to show this. I think
Yeah.
it'll be interesting to people to see it.
yeah, and this other one is also a child's quilt, and it is
yeah, it's got
appliqued.
animals.
So it uses embroidery as well, but it only uses the embroidery on the outside to make sure that the little animals stay attached.
Oh, yes.
So an applique is fabric laid on top of your quilt. And this person made this crib-sized quilt with all kinds of zoo animals. So I mean,
Oh, that's
and
neat.
farm animals, pigs, and maybe that's a horse, but I don't know.
Yeah, and I like the colors too.
Yeah.
Very nice.
So there's a sheep and a giraffe.
So now, did
and-
you find that one somewhere else?
I bought it at a thrift shop. Yeah.
Okay, I thought so
Yeah.
because it's not something you would see.
No, and not something I would do either.
No.
No.
Well, this has been really fun for me. I've learned so much, Nancy.
Well, good.
Now, the next thing I want to do is tell people about the show, the quilt show at the high school, isn't it?
It was at the high school years ago, and then it moved to the middle school, and now the quilt show is at Rivercrest Elementary.
Oh, that's right.
And it's at Rivercrest Elementary because we have so many wonderful things going on for our middle school and high school kids that
Oh, that's true.
the buildings were busy.
Okay.
But the Rivercrest Elementary School is a perfect location for our quilt show.
Good.
It's light and airy. It has really good lighting, so the colors of the quilts are easily discerned. And
Good.
the gym is in the center with hallways around it, so people can walk around that center gym and see other things. It's really very nice.
And you'll take part in that.
Oh yes, yes.
And your group is called the Hudson Heritage Quilts?
Yeah, Hudson Heritage Quilters.
Quilters.
And so we have a Facebook page and we have a website.
Oh, that would be
And
good.
we are, a nonprofit. So our website is Hudson Quilters,
Yeah.
HudsonHeritageQuilters.org.
.org, right.
And our Facebook page is Hudson Heritage Quilters. And, there's all kinds of information there. What I wanted people to realize is that, that it can be complicated or it can be simple. But if anyone's really interested, there is information on our website. But the Hudson Library has a wealth of books that are about quilting history and patterns and how to. And so it's one more reason to go to our local library.
That is perfect. I'm
Yeah.
so glad you got that in.
Yeah, I
Because as a supporter of the library,
Oh, yes.
it's our town really needs that library.
Oh, yes. And it provides
I'm
things
so in
for
favor
absolutely
of it.
everyone. Yes.
Actually, the garden club I'm in does the plants
yes.
and the plantings outside, so I'm very much in favor of
Yes,
that.
and now the windows are
Glad
all
you
back.
mentioned it, though. Yeah. Oh, it took a long time to
Yeah.
get the right windows.
Yeah.
Now, you already know the dates for the show.
Right. The show will be November 4 and 5
That's right.
of 2023. Our show is every other year, so it's always the odd years.
Oh, I didn't know.
It's a lot of work, so it would be difficult to do it every single year.
Okay.
And I would venture that there will, at our show there are always several things. We always have at least 200 quilts made by local people.
Wow.
We have a history section called a bed turning. I don't know if you're familiar with that.
No.
But sometimes the Octagon House may lend us their quilts. And so quilts are layered on a bed. And then our docent will explain the history of this quilt, then turn it back and explain the history of the next quilt and so on.
Yes.
So we have bed turnings, we have specialty challenges, and a book sale, and and a raffle quilt. The raffle quilt is always gorgeous, and the proceeds from our raffle quilt always benefit local food shelves. So our members are from River Falls, Hudson, and Roberts, and so the proceeds from the raffle quilt go specifically to those 3 food pantries.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
So you're really doing it, to benefit the community as well.
Yes.
And I don't know who wouldn't be interested in that.
Oh,
I am.
It's great
But
fun.
I've never
and
been to the show.
Well, you'll have
but
to
I
come.
have to. And you know what we can do is we can put up this contact person.
Yes.
Do you think we need the chairperson, or should we just do the contact
You can
person?
do the contact person, and that's fine.
I think we can put that up on our screen.
Okay, yeah.
The thing I don't know, but it's to be determined probably, is the time.
Oh, it's usually from 9 o'clock in the morning till 4 o'clock in the evening.
Oh, 9 to 4.
Yeah.
Perfect, and it's a weekend.
Yes, Saturday and Sunday.
Okay, now.
Yeah, when the kiddos aren't in class.
Yeah, that's right. That's what you have to do.
Yes.
Now, I have to back up just one question before we sort of wind down here. What did you mean by bed turning, did you say?
A bed turning is
What is
a
that?
way. It is a way to display a series of 6 or 8 or a dozen quilts. And so for a bed turning, you have a bed and you layer one quilt on top of another, and each of those quilts has some significance. So the top quilt history will be shared with the visitors. And when the history of that quilt is shared, then we lift that quilt up, take it away, and there's another quilt underneath it. And we will share the history of that quilt for all of our visitors. Then we remove that quilt and go on to the next quilt. And so we turn one, and then we tell the history, we turn another, and so on.
Wow. And it really interests me to think you've got something from the Octagon House.
Oh, yes, yes.
That would be fun to see.
Yes.
I mean, I've gone through on tour, but I don't know that I can even remember what I saw as far as a
and
quilt.
the Octagon House does have a collection of quilts.
Oh.
And they are local quilts
Yeah.
made by people who currently or once lived here.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, and I really love history. In my retirement, that's one of the channels
yes.
I'm on all the time. Well, I have enjoyed this so very much,
Well,
Nancy.
thank you.
You have a wealth of knowledge about all of this.
I'm a storyteller. Yeah.
Yep, that's right. And I just want to thank you so much for taking time to bring the quilts and come down and meet with me. And I hope that everybody watching, I'll look at the audience now, I hope you all enjoyed this talk. I know I've learned so much. And I just hope that you will enjoy it. And if you want to give us feedback, we'd like that too. So thank you for watching today.